In the entire 65-year history of human spaceflight, China has never once allowed a foreign astronaut aboard its spacecraft or its space station. Not a single one. The Tiangong Space Station has been an exclusively Chinese domain since its first module launched in 2021, a deliberate, carefully guarded boundary that Beijing drew between its space program and everyone else's. That boundary just ended. China selected 2 Pakistani Air Force pilots, announced their names to the world, welcomed them to the China Astronauts Research and Training Center, and confirmed that one of them will fly to the Tiangong Space Station later in 2026 as the first foreign human being in Chinese space history to cross that threshold. Their names are Mohammad Zeeshan Ali and Khurram Daud. Pakistan has entered the space age, and the story of how it happened and what it means is one of the most significant developments in global space exploration this decade. The formal announcement came on April 23, 2026, when the China Manned Space Agency confirmed that 2 Pakistani candidates had been selected as reserve astronauts for training ahead of a mission to the Tiangong Space Station. The announcement identified the 2 men by name and rank. Wing Commander Mohammad Zeeshan Ali and Commander Khurram Daud, both experienced pilots from the Pakistan Air Force. Xinhua, China's official state news agency, carried the announcement with language that left no room for ambiguity about its historical significance, describing the selection and training of astronauts for Pakistan as a milestone in the history of China's space program and a landmark achievement in international cooperation on the Chinese space station. The China Manned Space Agency confirmed that after completing all required training and evaluations, one of the 2 men will participate in a space mission as a payload specialist, becoming the first foreign astronaut ever to board the Tiangong Space Station. The backup candidate will remain on the ground unless the primary is ruled out by a medical issue. One man will cross the threshold that has never been crossed. The other will have prepared equally hard to be ready if needed. On April 23rd, the same day the China Manned Space Agency made its public announcement, Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif met personally with both astronauts before their departure to China to begin their training. He posted directly on his official X account about the meeting, writing that it was a pleasure meeting Commander Khurram Daud and Wing Commander Mohammad Zeeshan Ali, and that he had congratulated them on their historic selection as the first Pakistani astronauts to train for China's space station missions. He called the achievement a reflection of the immense talent of the Pakistani people and the growing strength of Pakistan-China cooperation in space technology. The Prime Minister's personal meeting with the 2 men before they left for China was not a ceremonial formality. It was a public signal from Pakistan's highest political leadership that this mission carries national significance at the level of a state priority, not simply a scientific exchange program. Pakistan has fewer than 200 million people who have ever seen one of their own compatriots reach space. That number is about to change. The path that brought Mohammad Zeeshan Ali and Khurram Daud to this moment began with a bilateral agreement signed in Islamabad. In February 2025, when China and Pakistan formalized their cooperation on sending a Pakistani astronaut to the Tiangong Space Station, the agreement between the China Manned Space Agency and Pakistan's Space and Upper Atmosphere Research Commission, known as SUPARCO, officially launched the selection process that would take just over a year to complete. Pakistan immediately began a preliminary astronaut selection process, with candidates drawn from the Pakistan Air Force's pilot corps. The logical starting pool for a country with no prior human spaceflight program, because military test pilots possess the combination of technical expertise, physical fitness, physiological resilience, and operational discipline that astronaut training programs require as a baseline. By the end of 2025, Pakistan had completed its preliminary selection and submitted candidates for the Chinese side to evaluate. The China Manned Space Agency conducted 3 rounds of rigorous screening before ultimately selecting Mohammad Zeeshan Ali and Khurram Daud as the 2 finalists who would travel to China for full astronaut training. The training program they have now entered at the China Astronauts Research and Training Center in Beijing is one of the most demanding preparation regimens in the world. The center, which has trained every Chinese taikonaut who has flown to orbit since the Shenzhou program began in 2003, will put both Pakistani pilots through a curriculum that covers physical conditioning intensive enough to prepare the body for the cardiovascular, muscular, and vestibular disruptions of weightlessness and return to gravity. They will undergo spacecraft systems, familiarization covering every aspect of Shenzhou capsule operations, its life support systems, emergency procedures, docking mechanisms, and the specific operating environment of a pressurized spacecraft in low Earth orbit. They will conduct mission simulations that recreate both nominal flight scenarios and emergency situations, requiring rapid decision-making under physiological stress. And they will receive specialized instruction related to their specific role aboard Tiangong, payload specialist operations, which means managing the scientific experiments, technology demonstrations, and research activities that represent the primary purpose of their mission from China's perspective. The China Manned Space Agency confirmed the training duration at approximately 6 months, meaning the man selected for the actual flight will be ready for launch in the October to November 2026 timeframe. The mission itself, based on detailed analysis by space program researchers and confirmed by multiple elements of China's public communications, will most likely be the Shenzhou 24 mission. Shenzhou 24 is expected to launch in late October or early November 2026, carrying 2 Chinese taikonauts and the selected Pakistani payload specialist to the Tiangong Space Station. The flight profile for a Shenzhou mission to Tiangong follows a well-established pattern. Launch from Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center in the Gobi Desert on a Long March 2F rocket, rendezvous and dock with the station within hours, transfer the arriving crew aboard, and begin the handover process with the departing crew. The Pakistani payload specialist will arrive at a station that is already occupied by the Shenzhou 23 crew, which began its mission in late April 2026. After the handover, the arriving crew will settle into life aboard the station, and the Pakistani astronaut will begin executing the specific research and technology activities planned for the visit. The visit is expected to be short duration, approximately 1 week aboard the station, before the Pakistani payload specialist returns to Earth, along with 2 of the Shenzhou 23 crew members who will have completed their standard 6-month rotation. 1 Chinese taikonaut from the Shenzhou 23 mission will remain aboard the station to continue into a planned 1-year stay, a first for China's crewed program in terms of continuous individual crew member duration. Understanding why this mission is historically unprecedented requires understanding what the Tiangong Space Station is and how deliberately China built it as an exclusively national program. When the International Space Station was being assembled through the 1990s and 2000s, China was explicitly excluded from participation by an American law called the Wolf Amendment, passed in 2011, which prohibits NASA from using federal funds for bilateral cooperation with China's space program without specific congressional approval. Shut out of the ISS, China decided not to seek alternative pathways to join another country's station. It built its own. The Tianhe core module launched in April 2021 was followed by the Wentian and Mengtian laboratory modules in 2022, completing a T-shaped station that is roughly 1/5 the mass of the ISS, about 70 metric tons compared to the ISS's approximately 420 metric tons, with a design life extending to 2035 or beyond. For the entire first 5 years of Tiangong's operational existence, the station carried only Chinese taikonauts. No foreign national had ever entered it, not as a guest, not as a research visitor, not in any capacity. The Pakistani mission will end that era entirely. China's decision to open Tiangong to international participants and to start with Pakistan is not simply a gesture of scientific generosity. It is a strategic calculation with multiple simultaneous payloads. Pakistan and China describe their relationship as an all-weather strategic cooperative partnership, a phrase that deliberately signals unconditional alignment regardless of what other geopolitical conditions prevail. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, a collection of infrastructure projects worth tens of billions of dollars that represents the flagship initiative of China's broader Belt and Road Initiative, runs through Pakistan and connects China's landlocked western regions to the Arabian seaport of Gwadar. Military cooperation between the 2 countries is deep and long-standing. In that context, inviting Pakistan's Air Force pilots to train at China's most prestigious and secretive military-adjacent research facility and to fly aboard China's National Space Station is an act of strategic trust-building that goes far beyond science. It demonstrates to the entire global South, the developing world that both China and the United States are competing to build relationships with, that China's space program, unlike the ISS framework, is genuinely open to countries that are not wealthy Western nations or established spacefaring powers. Zhang Jingbo, the spokesperson for the China Manned Space Agency, confirmed that the training and eventual flight of a Pakistani payload specialist aboard Tiangong fully demonstrates China's open attitude and willingness to share its space development achievements with the international community. The agency's official statement went further, saying that China's manned space program will always open its doors wide, welcoming countries around the world to participate in cooperation in areas such as scientific experiments, technological tests, and astronaut selection and training aboard the Chinese space station, jointly expanding the understanding of the universe and contributing to the building of a community with a shared future for humanity. That language, community with a shared future for humanity, is a specific phrase from the political vocabulary of Chinese foreign policy that appears in official communications when Beijing wants to signal that an initiative is connected to its broader vision of a multipolar international order. The Pakistani space mission is not just a science experiment. It is a statement about what kind of space future China intends to build and who it intends to build it with. For Pakistan itself, the meaning of this mission operates on multiple levels simultaneously. SUPARCO, The Space and Upper Atmosphere Research Commission was established in 1961, making it one of the oldest space agencies in the developing world, created just 4 years after the Soviet Union launched Sputnik. For more than 6 decades, SUPARCO has operated satellites, conducted atmospheric research, and maintained a technical space capability without ever placing a Pakistani national in orbit. The gap between having a space agency and having a human spaceflight program has been one of the defining features of the divide between the world's spacefaring powers and the rest of the world. Pakistan is about to cross that gap, not with its own rocket, not yet, but with a bilateral agreement, a rigorous selection process, and 2 of its most accomplished military pilots, proving that Pakistani talent is capable of meeting the standards of the most demanding human spaceflight training program in the world. Wing Commander Mohammed Zeeshan Ali and Commander Khurram Daud are both products of a Pakistan Air Force pilot training system that has produced some of the most capable aviators in the region. Both men are described as seasoned pilots, which in the context of Air Force service means they have accumulated the kind of flight hours, mission variety, and operational experience that separates professional military aviators from merely competent ones. Military pilots who fly high-performance jet aircraft operate in an environment that, while dramatically different from spaceflight, builds exactly the physiological and cognitive resilience that astronaut training then develops further. They are accustomed to rapid decision-making under physical stress, to wearing life support equipment, to operating complex systems while their bodies are being pushed by acceleration and altitude, and to maintaining mission focus through conditions that would incapacitate an untrained person. Those qualities are the raw material that the China Astronauts Research and Training Center is now working with. The 6 months of training ahead of them will transform that raw material into something more specific: the capability to function as a productive crew member aboard a space station in low Earth orbit. The geopolitical framing of the Pakistani mission becomes even more striking when placed alongside what is happening on the other side of the space divide. The ISS, built and operated by the United States, Russia, Japan, Canada, and Europe, is scheduled for retirement by 2030. NASA is developing plans for a successor station through commercial partnerships, and the international partners of the ISS are in various stages of negotiating their involvement in whatever comes next. China is not part of those conversations, and the ISS's international partnership, for all its genuine scientific achievement, has never included a Pakistani astronaut, an Egyptian astronaut, a Nigerian astronaut, or an astronaut from any of the dozens of developing nations that are home to the majority of humanity. The Tiangong International Program, if it continues to expand beyond the Pakistani mission, has the potential to offer access to space for national astronauts who would otherwise never have a path to orbit. That vision, space, is something that belongs to all of humanity, not just to the wealthy nations that built the first generation of infrastructure, is what the China-manned space agency is explicitly invoking when it describes the Pakistani mission as a contribution to the peaceful use of outer space for the benefit of all humanity. In October or November 2026, a Long March 2F rocket will rise from the Gobi Desert carrying a Shenzhou capsule. Inside that capsule, wearing a Chinese-made spacesuit, will be one of the 2 men who are right now, today, inside the China Astronauts Research and Training Center in Beijing, learning to live and work in space. Either Mohammed Zeeshan Ali or Khurram Daud will cross the distance between Earth and orbit that no Pakistani has ever crossed. They will dock with a space station that no foreigner has ever entered. They will float through the hatch and become, in that single moment, a part of space history that cannot be undone. Pakistan's 220 million people will watch through cameras and screens, and one of the things humanity has been slowly learning for 65 years of spaceflight will be demonstrated again: that the sky is not a boundary, it is the beginning of everything that comes next.